Well, good morning. So excited that it was a warm day. I'm pretty sure that was a lot of reason you guys are here outside of the wonderful topic that we're talking about. Thank you for coming to the MKE Tech Hub's Q2 meeting. We're excited to have you. Before we get started, though, we want to have a wonderful welcome from Ms. Sangeeta, which is our board president and also Northwestern Mutual's vice president of customer success. Can you come welcome us, Sangeeta? Thank you.
Hello, everybody. I'm so excited to be here. I'm Sangeeta Rai. I play a few different roles at Northwestern Mutual. I'm the VP of Customer Success. I represent Northwestern Mutual on the board for Milwaukee Tech Hub, as well as American Red Cross, and I'm the executive sponsor for Women in Tech at Northwestern Mutual. Although it seems like diverse roles, the common thread to all of that is service to our clients, service to our employees, service to our advisors, and service to our community. And that's what I'm really passionate about. It's been exciting to see the membership grow at our Milwaukee Tech Hub, and we're so happy to see a packed house here today. So welcome, everybody. I want to welcome you all on behalf of my fellow board members at the Milwaukee Tech Hub, as well as Northwestern Mutual. We have a very exciting program here for you today. And I want to thank the Milwaukee Tech Hub, Kathy and team, as well as the Northwestern Mutual team members who have put this together. And, you know, let's get real. AI is one of the hottest topics on the planet. And right now, what's between this amazing panel and you listening to this amazing panel is me. So I'm going to get out of the way and give it back to Shakia. And thank you again. Welcome, everybody.
I have a handheld mic, so just bear with me. As Sangeeta said, thank you for being here with us today. My name is Shakia, and super excited to be with this amazing panel. Super excited. I had the opportunity to have conversations prior to just make sure that I was prepared and sounded smart while I was up here talking about AI. But I want to first introduce Eli. Eli Goldman is a co-founder of Character, a seed stage venture capital fund investing in software startups at the intersection of technical differentiation and behavior insight. Since starting Character in 2020, the firm has invested in more than 30 companies, nearly half of which are leveraging AI for applications in enterprise SaaS, industrial control systems, healthcare, and life sciences. Before starting Character, Eli was a general partner at Capital Midwest, where he led investments in seed stage companies, often serving on boards and advising CEOs on product and go-to-market and strategy. Thank you, Eli, for being here with us today. Next, we have Israel Squires with Midpoint Ventures. He is the founder and managing partner of Midpoint Ventures, which is an AI venture firm that both builds AI software products and invests in early stage AI startups. Israel took his first software product from 0 to 1 at 23 years old and has since raised over 20 million combined as an entrepreneur and VC in some of the world's most advanced AI markets. Led by Israel and his partner, Devon Stokes, Midpoint works under John Laird's SOAR General Cognitive Architecture for developing systems that exhibit intelligent behavior. Let's clap it up for Israel. Thank you. And then we also have Mark Snyder. His current role is to lead the effort to scale both team and technology platforms at Synthetic. He has over 20 years of experience developing SaaS products and core technology systems in industries including finance, manufacturing, nonprofit, healthcare, and online commerce. Born and raised right here in Milwaukee, he is proud to be the part of the local ecosystem. And as we talk about Synthetic, it is a Delafield-based startup on a mission to unlock the power of AI. Their core product is rapid automated image classification, which provides accelerated capabilities to detect and classify without labels or pre-trained models. Thank you. Give it up for our panel today. All of the distinct titles and everything that they're doing. So we're here to talk about AI and all the wonderful things about it. When we think about it, we hear the good and the bad, right? We hear those that are for it, those that are scared of it, those that are against it. One thing we can't deny is that it's happening and we need to be prepared for it. So this conversation is really just based off of the VC perspective, the founders and startup perspective, and what does that look like for our ecosystem? So that's how we're going to start. We will have questions afterwards, as well as if you're online, please feel free as you're listening to drop those questions in the chat. But I want to start off with defining AI, because I know a lot of us have different ideas of what AI is. I hear a lot of people say Chat GPT and all of those things, but let's start with defining what AI is. And I think I'm gonna throw that to you, Mark. Can you define what AI is?
Oh, that's an interesting one. It depends on who you ask sometimes, right? It's funny, when you work with engineers, they will typically look at the term AI and then point to 10 lines of code and say, that's AI right there. You can provide an input, it'll make a decision based on how it's programmed, and then it will produce an output that you can utilize. However, I think the way to truly define AI is a little bit more nuanced, in that it's based on our impression as humans of what technology's core capabilities are today. And AI is that next step, right? So we can look at a rotary phone and say, well, that's AI, right? But nobody views it that way. AI is what we believe technology can do today. And then you add that intelligence aspect to it. And that's how you can look at something and say, okay, that's something new. That's something cutting edge. That's truly what we're today defining as artificial intelligence. And so that you can look out into the ecosystem today and identify those things that have exceeded that capability. And those are the things we would generally designate as artificial intelligence.
Okay, so if we look at AI, and you're talking about is defined as what we're learning today. So the next wave of AI, if we look at what is happening, where it's going, how can we, one, look at that, but then also talk about the needed awareness around where we are today and where AI is going. And then the part two, what is machine learning in AI? And I'm gonna ask all three. So we can start with Eli. Okay.
Yeah, that's great. Interesting. So I think about where we are today. Many of the developments that we're seeing in these large language models are really based on the work that Google and the University of Toronto did in 2017 around a set of algorithms called transformers. And transformers are a type of neural network that have some characteristics that make them really good at processing and generating language. And prior to 2017, one of the issues that the space faced was that we were quite good at labeling images. So there was a lot of progress in what we call computer vision, where you could say, this is a person, this is a fire hydrant. That field had really gone quite far. But the current techniques to sort of work with language, to work with text, had stalled out. They just weren't doing well. And the beauty of the transformer architecture, which was originally developed as a tool for translation, to turn something from English to French and back, is that it allowed for a much greater contextual awareness when you're making predictions for text. And it also introduced the concept of parallelization. And so one of the sort of underlying bases that powers these large language models is the fact that they're large. So we have training sets from the entire corpus of text on the internet, from books perhaps that have been read. And the magic was that if you started to train models on these huge databases, you had insights that previously were just unimaginable. I think when ChatGPT was released in November of last year, it seems like eons ago, but it was really quite recent. And so when I think about sort of the state of the art related to everything that's happening in AI and ML, I think really this transformer architecture kicked things off. And I have a few other comments, but I should probably turn it over to you.
Yeah, I'll jump in on that. So the transformer architecture, if you think of ChatGPT, what ChatGPT is transformers stacked on top of one another. I think in the AI world, we're looking at this like, this is the analogy I love using. It's like it's your uncle. It's your cool uncle that you love to chat with, sometimes kind of full of it. it's a small caveat of the overall AI world, right? Machine learning, it's the data portion of it. ChatGPT itself, in terms of implementation of cognition, I think the AI world, we're fascinated that cognition actually isn't implemented into those transformers. It's just transformers stacked on top of one another, but it gives the experience very similar to that of cognitively driven software. So I think that's been very revolutionary just to show the capabilities of that. But as Sam put it, I don't think Sam Altman, ChatGPT, I don't think that's the future. Building out these huge transformers that's super expensive, takes a ton of time. I don't know if that's the future, but it's certainly opened the door to more innovation, which I think we'll probably get into talking about today. But again, ChatGPT is just this really, really robust machine learning model that is super cool, using natural language processing and maybe one of the most robust sort of databases in the history of the world. Fascinating stuff.
And I think I'd add too, on top of the transformer stuff, the other thing that really seems interesting to me is the things like the generative adversarial network architectures and some of the new architectures that have come out as well that not only allow us to capitalize on the data, but now we're able to train AI models to almost compete and learn from each other. And from that, I think what we're seeing now is generative AI, which I don't think we've seen a lot of before, which is really interesting because what it does is it takes a variety of different sources of information and almost creates new things from that. I think it's still based on, much like most creativity, it's still based on influences. But to us, it seems like it's creating things we haven't encountered before. And that was, I think, another step too that's happened recently that's really kind of pushed things forward.
Thank you. And kind of staying in the vein of this question, I was watching the 60 Minutes with the Google, which Israel told me to watch. And it was talking about the current ecosystem and how fast it's changing and what it would look like 10, 20, 30 years from now. Like it is moving in such a rapid pace, right, that we have to pay attention to it. And I'll pose this to all three. How is AI changing the current ecosystem, in your opinion? And what is that going to look like, in your opinion, in the next 30 years?
Well, all right, I'll take a stab. So I think one of the really special things about the release of a lot of these new AI techniques and models is that the barrier to utilize them and the barrier to implement them, whether on a personal side or on a corporate side, is relatively low compared with some of the other developments that you've seen in the tech space over the past 30 years. And so, if you run a business and you were in the early days of building out compute power, you may have had to build a data center. Maybe you have a data center and now you use cloud computing. All of these are very, very expensive things to implement. And that's really not the case with AI and ML. And what we've seen over the past few months is a true, I think, crowd sort of enthusiasm, a lot of which, by the way, was founded on models, foundational models that were released into the wild from mega corporations. So now I think Meta has open sourced one of their models a few days ago, but prior to that, these models had leaked and the open source community, the Twitter community started to build on them. And so I think one of the things that's most exciting is that, if you're a person or if you're a business, you can actually try out ChatGPT. You can try out any of these sort of algorithms within your own business or within yourself without having to spend $10 or $20 million. And that presents a lot of interesting recipes for how businesses will continually utilize these new developments, when they should utilize these new developments, and also the amount of widgets that are available. So that's sort of my 100,000 foot view.
Yeah, I mean, again, we could go 100 different directions with this, but I like to focus on the double exponential, and I think that's where we're at, is that you can get things done way faster, and that's just going to keep increasing. Kind of to your point, especially now you're going to have AI at literally competing with itself to make itself better in different circumstances. So that aspect is incredibly transformative. You mentioned 2017. I got into AI in 2016. That was back when you're talking to PhDs and they're telling you, hey, here's what's going on. And really no one else in the company actually knew what was happening besides those 3 or 4 folks. That is not the game anymore. Folks that are getting into AI now, it is just completely different. It's transformative. You have everyone in here that I think if you all spent maybe a few hours, you can learn how to do prompt engineering with ChatGPT. That's crazy to think about. So that kind of double exponential aspect of being able to spin up widgets way faster, and you don't have to have a PhD and you don't have to have this, academic background, it's going to change a lot. It'll change a lot.
100%. Like a good example of that is just on the development side. We have folks using ChatGPT to write code. And some of these folks don't have necessarily the background to truly do that from the gate. And they're able to describe to ChatGPT, here's a script I need, and this is what I needed to do. And they take it and run it. And I think kind of along the lines of what Eli was saying too, I think the feedback loop is just going to be accelerated even to a point where it's just crazy in that you can go do something you've never been able to do and learn from that experience and also build your skills up at the same time, but still achieve a task or complete a task in the process. And so I think just on the development side, I've started to use ChatGPT to do some of my coding because it's like, this will take me a long time to go figure this out and research on the internet. I'll just ask it, I'll verify that the output is correct and then move on. And that feedback loop is just incredible. So
to help people give a better perspective on that, because I think the software world is going to be revolutionized. Before ChatGPT, did you have to have another engineer working with you on that? And like, was the process involving, you had your QA person, is there someone being eliminated in the process is what I'm asking.
not at all. And kind of the joke we have on our team is we're all 10X developers now.
Yep.
In that we no longer have to focus on the minor details. We can be extremely productive. And those of us that embrace those things are immediately finding that value. So I think there is certainly that concern initially, right? And I think this is going to translate to other areas as well. Like I think developers are just the first ones experiencing it, but those that truly do embrace it and understand the characteristics of how it works and what it can't do is probably the most critical thing, are finding that they can focus on the things they want to focus on.
So again, staying in that vein, because I'm going to just skip the questions and continue with the conversation. Looking at like the double expenditure and being able to be a 10 times X developer, what should companies start to look for and prepare for with this transition of speed, of processes, of even developers being able to move some things away from what they would normally have to do? How can companies actually start to prepare for this or transition with the change that's happening drastically, in your opinions?
Well, I think one easy thing that companies can do is prepare their data to be actionable. And this isn't the lift that it used to be in the sense of really needing everything to be perfectly clean, perfectly ready to be utilized. But the more of it you have, again, remember the power of large language models is that they're trained on a lot of data. And so I think it's natural to say that the more easily that you can interact with your own data within your company, the more easily you'll have interesting results potentially. And the second really is around change. At Character, we're focused on using design sprints. My co-founder Jay-Z is here, process he developed at Google Ventures to really navigate uncertainty. And I think that within organizations, having the correct team that can say, here's how we're going to utilize and implement these new technologies in a testable and robust way is super important. And again, getting back to the cost, you don't have to bet the house on this, right? Like this is not a 20% of your profit for the year. This is, let's get a few nice engineers, let's spend $300,000 or $400,000 to figure out how we might be able to 3, 5, 10x our business. So that's how I think about it.
Yeah, I'd add to that, kind of more practical on the human side of things is internal upskilling. How can you take folks and upskill them or give them resources, pay for different seminar, I don't know what it is, courses, there's going to be a bunch of them. How can you allow these folks to grow internally? Right. And then there's always going to be the talent wars that exist. But I think the companies that do the greatest job over the next few years of building internally and allowing whoever's passionate about learning this space and whoever's passionate about learning how to do something as, I'll put it simple, as prompt engineering and ChatGPT, empower those folks, create a budget for those folks, because that can ultimately result in getting the clean data and building out a simple network with your data. Whereas historically, The process is you're going in, and most of these big companies in Milwaukee, for example, have these massive data lakes, and it's not organized and it's not labeled and segmented. And well, what do we do with this data? We were told to store it. It's like, well, you've been storing garbage. It's garbage in, garbage out. You guys need to talk to your business development team and figure out what outcome metrics you need to develop, and then go back to your data and organize it. And it's this revolving kind of, okay, hold on, what's the process and how much money is that going to cost internally? There's no way the board is going to approve that. That can change if you guys empower your internal staff who's passionate about this space. That's, again, opinion.
Absolutely. I think the way I look at it is it's to Eli's point, is getting your data in a format that you can start to experiment. So I view it as creating sandboxes, because the thing with AI is it's not as prescriptive as traditional engineering. And so a lot of times you have to actually interact with it and experiment with it to understand not only its true capabilities, but how it can provide value to you. And so I love Eli's kind of point of get your data in a format where you can start interacting with it and seeing what different types of AI you can apply to it to get different types of outcomes. And then to Israel's point, like enable folks within your organization to be able to utilize that and try those tools and experiment. We're finding, even with our own product, we'll put out, something into QA, and we'll try it out and we'll learn just from that experience. And we've come to terms with, you can't necessarily predict upfront what it's going to do until you get it into the hands of people. And so we have a wide variety of people within our organization who use it in different ways, and then we collect that feedback. And I think that's what every organization needs to be out there thinking about, is how do I create those environments where I can interact with this information and skill up the folks, and even identify the skills that need to be further enhanced.
Thank you. So we talking about reskilling, upskilling data. What industries do you think is going to change or probably have the most dramatic change quite quickly? Like I think about software development in that industry. What do you think is going to have a very quick transition, and what other industries may be impacted if, like, thinking about the AI movement in the next wave?
Yeah.
One of the things I think a lot about is we at Synthetic, we have a group called AI for Impact. And so even before thinking about industries, like how can we do things that make the world better? And some of the experiments we've ran is, can we go out and use AI to improve the search and rescue process, taking large quantities of aerial footage from drones, things like that, and reduce the time it takes for these organizations to find what they're looking for, whether it be somebody who is lost or damage to different buildings due to natural disasters, things like that. So I like to think from that level first, like what can we do to improve the world around us? And then when you start getting into like specific industries, I do think software development is certainly one that's going to be dramatically impacted. I think content creation, again, it's the 10X thing there too. It's like I could ask ChatGPT to write me a blog post, right? But there's a human element to that needs to be refined, iterated, and expanded on. And so I think folks in that space are going to find a lot of value. I think the other thing we're kind of seeing too is these models are really good at taking large amounts of data and aggregating them and making them kind of parsable and human readable. And so I think areas like finance, legal are going to start to benefit from being able to take large documents and things like that and simplify them, at least initially, so that they can start to review them. So
I think this is going to sound weird, but I was thinking about soap dispensers the other weekend. I was at the Milwaukee Public Museum, and they have some really nice soap dispensers there. And as I was sort of like bubbling up, I was looking at this thing, and I realized someone spent an enormous amount of time to make the CAD file for the soap dispenser. They probably had a whole department that they were going back and forth and saying, well, we think this dispenses soap a little better than this one, or we think this design's a bit better. They put these CAD files together. They went out to their outsourced partner, maybe in China, maybe somewhere else. They went back and forth to get the BOM to a suitable cheapness. And eventually, after a whole bunch of time, they shipped out these soap dispensers, one of which made it to the Milwaukee Public Museum that I was enjoying. Now, if you think about sort of what's happening in AI and ML, think about that whole process, and let's see which pieces could be sort of taken into the algorithmic realm. And so at the very start, someone built a CAD file for a soap dispenser. We're starting to see 3D models that can be prompted and make a soap dispenser. So presumably you could see a soap dispenser like that. You could see using generative to make copy for your soap dispenser to see how the Milwaukee Public Museums of the world respond to potentially buying it. You could see an agent go back and forth in a much more data-rich and automated way to your outsourced partner in China, not having the discrepancies with how much you're going to order, having much greater clarity. And all of that can be done basically with very little human intervention. And so when we start to think about companies all around the world and how broad these applications can be and how sort of collapsible in terms of the labor and effort that this soap dispenser company had, which was probably 50 or 60 people who had worked their career making this, and now you can sort of do it with software. I think it's quite broad and powerful.
Yeah, I'll do one. In the medical industry, we're really hyper focused on different variations of screening tools. I think in Wisconsin is one of them. We make it kind of deeper dive into this. I think medical imaging is, and the data that we have here in Wisconsin between the various research institutions, I think is an advantage that we have that we could potentially tap into. But screening tools is going to take a little bit more time than some of these generative AI tools that get out there. But I really think that is going to change and revolutionize some of the industries. I'm going to take a dark note here to scare everybody. Cybersecurity. And I'm probably not going to say anything that everyone isn't already aware of, but I think cybersecurity is a massive overhaul in the next few years. And I'll just say this because we could talk for an hour just on this particular topic. Phishing emails, way more sophisticated. You're talking with basically human beings now that can then follow up and set up a video chat, and you pull up the video and it's me on the video, but it's not really me. Hopefully it's a little bit skinnier, more shape version of me. But I mean, that's right around the corner. And that's kind of a terrifying thing, right? When historically pretty basic, janky phishing emails work because human beings make mistakes. Now the level of sophistication in just that area, the multitude of different cyber attacks that can happen. I think talking about companies and upskilling and all the cybersecurity should also be a focus, and making sure that you're educating your folks that this is a thing and it is not happening tomorrow. It's already here. It's already happened.
Thank you for that. And I will always go into the bathroom now and pay attention to the soap dispensers because of the great minds. No, thank you for that. Kind of like changing the trajectory and now looking at the VC side of things, right? As a founder, as a company, as a startup, what is the VC perspective of what you're looking for? And where do you feel you're seeing a lot of innovation happen around AI?
So for us, we have a few different mental models of thinking about AI and ML investing. I'm going to stick with my very simple and summarized version. And if anyone wants to chat more about it, like catch me after, because we love talking about this stuff. I think the two main lanes you can look at are true technical differentiation and then true integration and sort of sales heft. The reason that I split it that way is because there are certain companies that are working on foundational models, things like the OpenAIs of the world, very, very complex research-driven teams with a lot of brain power behind them. And that's sort of a category of thing that is hefty. It's of itself, it's potentially super game-changing, but it's perhaps not as common. You can't sort of go off the street and start to develop a foundation model for some crazy new idea that you have. In contrast, there's a lot of companies that are essentially stitching together pieces of algorithms that have been released, doing their own coding, upskilling themselves. And I think the key question for them is, how can they integrate with their customers? And sometimes those customers are businesses themselves, and sometimes those customers are people. And we're at a sort of weird inflection point where both sides can gain a lot. But if you think about the personal side, there's never been a greater sort of upskilling that you can have that is outside of the traditional education or interaction mode that you usually have. And so, you can start to utilize these tools for yourself. And maybe you were writing copy and it was taking you, 100 hours a week, and now you can use ChatGPT yourself. If the end product is really good, well, that's quite interesting personally. So I think those are sort of the two angles we look at: corporate focused, individual focused, deep tech, deep integration, expertise at a high level. There's a few more.
Have you seen some great innovation that you're like, this is where we're at, or this is what we want? I'm sorry, I was asking if there has been like something on the cusp where you're like, this is amazing, this is what we need.
Absolutely. We've found, great companies in both categories. And I think everyone's always interested in the sci-fi stuff, the deep tech, and feel really happy about a few of the investments we made there. But there's also a lot of interesting things happening at the integration level as well.
Yeah, I mean, we have a very similar investment thesis to Character. So deep tech, looking at it, I'll say the things that we're avoiding right now, because there's just a massive sort of oversaturation happening of generative AI plays and HR tools and all this stuff that are going, like, really cool tools that can certainly work, but scalability is the big question. When you're looking at talking about venture capital, we need things that can scale, things that maybe are niche enough or have enough data behind it or the team behind it to actually scale that company. And I'll actually caveat to Synthetic, because I've known about this company for years. When Titletown Tech, I was up in Green Bay when the first investment happened, and it's been my favorite AI company in the state, and it still is. And I think the potential that you all have. So maybe give folks kind of just a snippet of what you all do, and then my answer will be, we like that kind of stuff.
So the good news is it's simple. Our strategy has always been show, don't tell. We're not big believers in creating large PowerPoint decks about what's possible, although we still do that, but that's not how we present ourselves. Our goal is always to come to the table with something live that you can interact with, and it might not always go perfect. We're okay with that. Our goal is to demonstrate that not only have we conceptualized something, but we've actually gone in and made it work. And so we do a lot of POCs, we do a lot of R&D, a lot of experimentation, all with the goal of when we go to a show or we present to VCs, to not only have something exciting, but something that they haven't seen before. So every time you talk to us, we're going to have inched a little bit forward. And I think that'd be the other thing I would say too, is maybe to watch for is the ability to iterate and progress. Where we take a lot of pride in the fact that we're always like pushing some new feature out. We're not waiting to see how the industry is necessarily aligning with certain things. We know that core capabilities is the key. And so we're building those capabilities and demonstrating them on a daily basis.
Thank you. So we're going to get to questions, Q&A from the audience. But I want to take it a different direction again and think about Milwaukee and Milwaukee as a whole. And of course, the surrounding areas, right? We just got Green Bay as #1 living place. But if we think about Milwaukee and AI and how people currently see us as a city, how can we utilize this opportunity to grow or transition in AI to create what we already know is happening in Milwaukee? Like, what can we do in that space to distinguish Milwaukee with AI, in your opinion?
Well, one thing that I'll just quickly say is I see founders in the audience, I see investors in the audience, I see people who run corporations in the audience. And I think that Milwaukee has much more talent and sort of savvy than people give credit to. To your point though, sometimes they don't talk about it. This is sort of a building town. And so I think that as we have, greater availability to connect with resources, not just within the country, but all over the world, the ability of, people and organizations in the town to run competent and sort of quiet, strong businesses, like that's the perfect use case for, getting your data in order and implementing AI. So I feel like it will happen. You just might not hear about it.
Yeah, I'll say as if we're talking about Milwaukee here, just doubling down on the things that we're great at already. I don't know, there are companies that, whether it's in the food and beverage, water industry, energy industry, obviously manufacturing, we make small things really, really well. What data do those companies have? And are those companies actually going to make an investment in their data and their AI strategies and their internal teams? We certainly have, I strongly believe, I think we have the capability to do great things in AI, but it's not easily done, right? And it starts with talent. So a lot of these companies that want, have initiatives, finding the talent and getting talent to move to Wisconsin and move to Milwaukee in those fields, not easily done. And really that's a multi-layered problem where you need private, you need public, you need communication, you need collaboration, you need state funding, you need all these things to go into building community and building. And it's a really, really multi-layered thing that frankly, Milwaukee's far behind on. That's just the reality of where we are at. So how can we tap into that? If I had to give an answer, I'd just say double down on the talent that you have internally and empower them with the ability to take, right? I don't know, hardware and understand, hey, this is a generator, for example, and how can we utilize the generators that we've sold all over the world? What data do we have behind that? Bring someone in internally that understands the mechanics of building and selling the hardware piece of it, tag on the software side and then get into AI. But I think that has to happen internally. There's not someone from the coast that's going to move here to work at a generator company. Maybe, I hope so, but it is a really, really difficult problem that we have because it's talent. It is a talent race. We can talk about AI all we want, but it is a talent race. So whatever we can do to help companies procure talent, hopefully the rest takes care of itself. So.
100% agree. I think the one great thing about Wisconsin is just the sense of community and the loyalty to the area. I think a lot about the Packers and how proud we are of the community-owned football team and things like that. And I think there's a lot of good things about that we can utilize to promote ourselves to that talent. But I agree 100%. I think cultivating the talent. The other thing I'll say too is I do feel sometimes like here in Milwaukee, we have a little bit of this imposter syndrome going on where it's like, well, we're not Silicon Valley, so we can't do this. Or the reality is we can. There's nothing stopping us from doing it. To Israel's point, we just need to push it forward and take on those things and think big. So I agree 100%. There's no easy answer to that. I think the answer is we just keep pushing forward. We continue to look at what's going on around us and try to find the problems that are out there, the difficult problems, and take shots at solving those using technology. And the reality is, we were talking before about now everything's in the cloud. So it's like, we don't have to have our own data centers here. We don't have to have infrastructure. We can host things all over the place. It's really about getting folks interested in what we're doing, getting them on board with the things we're doing, trying to convince them to move here is a great thing too. And just being bold about it, I think is ultimately living here my whole life. I feel like there's just this constant, but we're in Milwaukee and this is Wisconsin. So what? This is a great place. We have a lot of really smart people here. I've met them and interacted with them throughout my career, and we should be proud of that.
Yes, we should be proud of that. Thank you. So I'm gonna stop my questions just so that we can have time for Q&A. I know you guys didn't come just to listen to me talk and ask questions. So I do want to give opportunity to have questions in the audience, questions from those that are in the chat. I have Melissa and Hasmin with the mics. So if you do have a question, if you could just speak into the mic so those online can actually hear you as well. You guys ready for questions? Okay, awesome. Anyone that has a question in the audience? We have one over here. Over here. Thank you guys. That was a great conversation. Thank you.
Question is for Mark and others. A little show and tell. We all followed the Chinese spy balloon success story. Can you just speak a little to how, if you used AI in that and how so without, trade secrets, but would love to hear a little more about that.
So the story is Corey, our CEO, was not feeling too well and was supposed to be home sick, resting, and got bored, and instead decided he wanted to try to hunt the Chinese balloon through Planet Labs satellite imagery. So what he did was he drew. he has a lot of background and understands a lot about photography and things like that. So he knew that there's this concept called a parallax in satellite imagery, that if something is floating at a certain altitude, as the satellites pass over it, the speed in which they pass will cause this artifact in the imagery that you see a red, a green, and a blue dot. So perfect circle. So he knew that. So what he did is, I think he went into Microsoft Paint or something like that and drew those 3 dots and then fed it into our software, and then loaded up the imagery in the general area in which he felt we would find it. And sure enough, it popped up within seconds. He was able to find it. So he got real excited, got us all on the phone. From there, it was 2 weeks of long nights and a lot of excitement. But I think in total searched, I think it was 60 to 70 terabytes worth of satellite imagery, and we're able to trace the exact path of the balloon to where we believe it was launched from. And then, using that, so this is a perfect case where the AI tool enabled us to find these things. And that, from what I understand, is no one up until then had been able to identify the exact latitudes and longitudes and altitudes and things like that. But we were able to do that using that technology enabler. But it was a combination of AI and human. Like, we contributed our expertise. It gave us that superpower that allows us to quickly search through that imagery. And from there, though, we were able to build the track. So I guess we're actually still looking for other balloons and things like that. But it was a great success for us. We were really excited. And we also felt that it was something that a lot of folks were interested in, wanted just, to know where it came from, things like that. We were able to answer some of those questions, which is ultimately what drives us, is, us being able to create clarity around different events. So.
Who needs Silicon Valley when we have it right here in Milwaukee? No. Other questions?
We have a question online.
Okay.
All right. The question coming online is, will there be AI solutions for those cybersecurity risks?
Go ahead. My short answer is yes. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think there has to be.
Yeah.
Yeah. I guess I have a little bit of a longer answer here, which is, some of you may have seen these calls to stop development on AI until we better understand how these models work. And there's this sort of notion of a virtuous compact to say, I'm signing up and we're going to pause for 6 months. One of the big risks in signing on to that is that the only people that will do that are virtuous actors, those that have good intentions, those that likely would not be bad in the ecosystem. And because there's so much data out there, through ArcGIS and just on Twitter, it's nothing is secret, right? And so if you think about non-virtuous actors, the problem is that when you develop malware, when you develop any of the other sort of nasty things that you could do with AI and ML, those people won't stop. And so I think that it's short-sighted to say we should take a pause when, in fact, the greatest challenges that we are likely to face in the near term from these applications are along cyber questions, and we really should accelerate development on them.
Amy, okay.
Hi, my question has to do with legacy applications and how AI will impact legacy or take them out. Is it just cheaper and better to redevelop using new algorithms, or is it, is there some hybrid solution that we would see? Milwaukee area has a lot of software development going on here and legacy systems.
It's a fascinating question. I've often wondered, one of the biggest challenges with software development is dealing with tech debt, right? And I do wonder if AI can help us using new, coding paradigms and better practices, apply those to existing code. I think that's one angle to think about it, is how can we use it to start to do refactoring and things like that. But another area also to think about is where do you plug it into existing stacks, right? So I've always been a big fan of don't rewrite everything, at least not initially, and try to find where the weakness is within a software platform, and then try to scale that out or build those pieces out. So I think AI probably has some pieces or a place to play there. But it's definitely a good question, because I think it does impact legacy technology. However, legacy technology has a lot of challenges associated with it too. It's usually there because it's critical and it can't be, it can't be easily replaced. And so the challenge with AI, a good example, ChatGPT, is this morning I asked it who our CEO was, and it knew. Then I asked it who our CTO was, and it had no idea. It made somebody up. So I asked it again, and it made somebody else up, and then finally admitted that it didn't know. So when you're talking about critical legacy technology, I'm not personally ready to just plug it in yet, but I think once we build validation processes and human review and things like that around it, it'll start to make more sense.
We have quite a few in the front. I can share my mic.
What suggestions would you have for using any currently off-the-shelf AI tools in design sprints or customer discovery, if any?
Well, I think one of the tools that we find super useful is automated note takers. We're partial to a solution called Fathom. And one of the key things that this allows us to do is to really quickly look back on those user research interviews on Friday and say, hey, here's what went well, here's what didn't go well, and to prep for those user research interviews. I know that there's also an enormous amount of prototyping tools that sort of can automatically generate, front end can automatically generate a whole host of really nice looking logos, nice looking, whatever you want to test out. We haven't sort of coalesced around a tool set for using those, but it seems clear to me that, on Thursday when we're doing prototyping, that there's a future in which those tools become increasingly important, but we don't have sort of an official list right now.
Got a question about education. So recently Khan Academy talked about how they're using chat and changing their model pretty significantly. But how do you see AI playing roles within K-12 education?
Who wants to take a shot at that one?
Well, I'll take a shot at this. I think that it represents one of the greatest level ups for the world that we've seen. And by that, I mean, if you think about access to Wikipedia, and if you only have a cell phone and you're in a very remote location somewhere other than the United States, or even in the United States, it's hard to sort of derive meaning from a video. It's hard to derive meaning from just cruising through Wikipedia. And yet the promise of having a more intuitive chat-based education system, which many of these large language models are perfect for, is that you really don't need that. You could envision a world in which you sort of text a number about trigonometry, and the tutor is right there, and it's available to anyone in the world. And so I am very, very bullish about sort of using these new technologies in a low friction way to help more broadly educate people around the world. And I think we're going to see more of that in the coming years.
Yeah, I think, implementation of those tools, these kids are literally now the AI future, right? And I think over the next 30 years, I talk about the double exponential, but I think the reality is that every asset class is going to be putting a ton of money into artificial intelligence, right? It's going to result in my kid, my oldest is 4 years old right now. By the time he graduates high school, his knowledge is probably going to be far surpassed what I have today, far, like not even close. So, I think implementation of AI tools is really important, but I'm a really old school guy as well. And I absolutely have my fears of, just like social media was awesome. Social media opened up so many different markets and connectivity and all that. If our kids are using ChatGPT to write everything for them or figure out a trigonometry question, are they really developing the skills that they need to develop? So I'm someone that side of it kind of terrifies me a little bit because you have to have those fundamental skills and then utilize, your new skills, because the world is, when they get into the workforce, that's what it's going to be. So I don't know. I don't know how K through 12 is. It sounds like an expensive problem.
Hi, my name is Dave G, and I'm the CEO and co-founder of a startup named Joy. And we're going to be a generative AI app to improve the mental health and reduce suicides on college campuses throughout the US. So we're just starting to look at doing a pre-seed, and this is kind of a question / commentary. We're from Wisconsin. A few of our founders teach at Wisconsin universities. And in the last week and a half, I mean, what we're hearing in the Midwest is literally send us a discounted cash flow statement, 5-year, send us a business plan and we'll think about it. Made one call to Silicon Valley, automatically got a valuation of 6 times what we thought. And they said, send us a pitch deck and we'll talk in 3 days. And so we want to take Midwest money, but how do we get to this point? Because this is obviously a cultural piece where investors in this state are willing to just take a flyer on pre-revenue startups. Because I mean, again, well, it's not just anecdotal. Because like I said, I teach entrepreneurs and I've talked to entrepreneurs and we see this over and over again. So.
Yeah, well, the conservative nature of investors in Wisconsin isn't anything new. So whether it's AI or Web3 or the .com boom, it's kind of the same here in Wisconsin. So I think most experienced founders know that you can likely get higher valuations on the coasts and maybe more easily capture capital. But I think depending on what your startup is identifying who in Wisconsin can provide strategic value. And there are more funds leading. I'm a huge fan of Character Capital. They do wonderful things. I'm a huge fan of Titletown Tech that invested in Synthetic. Titletown Tech leads pre-seed rounds sometimes. I think more now than Fund One. We'll see. I'll contact you with those, get you connected to those guys if you want. But I don't know. It's not an easy answer. You can't turn a conservative base less conservative like that just because AI is super cool and they need to switch it up. Not an easy answer, frankly.
I love that story though, because what it shows is how much more connected, the ecosystems are in the sense that it is not a huge issue that you're here. This Silicon Valley firm is talking with you and they seem pretty excited. I think, best case scenario is like, take your great term sheet from, what works for you guys. If there's some local people that end up, coming in to syndicate it. And then when you guys have a big exit and then you sort of are in that position to say, hey, I'm willing to take the flyers. It's like, let's take some flyers at 10 to 15,000. This isn't like breaking the bank, but it's like coffee meetings. I think that's maybe one piece that like with time, I think it will come, but it just will take some time.
I'm going to loop back to K-12 education really quick. So I work with 57 school districts in southeastern Wisconsin. Milwaukee Tech Hub is a partner to support what's called regional career pathways. Digital technology, one of the highest need, highest demand areas in our region. Yet it's one of the areas where K-12 is furthest behind in supporting. And so everybody in this room needs talent in order to advance that work. We're still working with JavaScript in most of our classrooms, right? We're not even to Python yet. You're talking about upskilling employees in business places. What does upskilling our students and our teachers look like? So maybe we're not talking curriculum or whatever, but what skills do they need in order to best access and apply AI, right? And not just in their private lives, but also in their work lives.
So I have 3 young boys, and I think one of the things I see a lot from them is they're very inquisitive. They have a ton of questions, and many of which I can't answer. So I do think things like ChatGPT could be the solution to a lot of that and allowing them like a personalized experience. But in terms of like courses and things, I'll say this, my personal experience is I want my oldest son to learn Python. He's expressed interest in that. And there are no good, that I've found at least, no good tools that can help us kind of go through that process. So a lot of times it's me sitting down, trying to show him what I know. And it's a challenge because I'm trying to do sophisticated things. He's trying to do basic things. So I think, I don't know what the answer to that is other than I think we just need to create the tools that allow those types of skills to be brought to the level of each individual child, and then it can help guide them through that skill up process. And I do think it is something like a large language model because that's capable of one of the cool things about GPT is you have a conversation with it, right? It starts to assess what you're going for and your intent. And I think that's extremely valuable for children because it can start to kind of see where they're at and figure out what is it they're actually trying to ask. So I think it's those types of technologies that will solve that, but I do think they just need to get to a level where they have the information that the children need. And I also think as a parent, it's my job to kind of what Israel is saying is be cautious because I don't want to just send them in there and allow them just to do anything. I want to guide that process too. So as a parent, it's how do I teach them how to prompt ChatGPT and how to get the information back and allow them to kind of go through that process. That's my mindset, at least. I'm in the thick of it right now. So I'm trying to figure it out myself, but I do think the tools that are being developed out there will strengthen that. I just don't think anybody's necessarily even focusing on that aspect. Like, this is all so new. We're all trying to figure out like, how do we apply this? I think there's ample opportunity to try to create models that are geared more towards children. So
yeah, having a foundational understanding of JavaScript and Python though is, I think that's absolutely crucial. No matter what happens, having that foundation and focusing on that is a good start. And there's too many, I think, unknowns to go any other directions than that right now, frankly.
So we're going to take about two more questions just to value the time as promised. So we'll take two more and then we'll kind of wrap it up.
So right here, what's the role of government in the future of AI? And do you see them today as an asset or liability?
Federal government, state government, government in general.
You pick your government.
I'm going to toss this to Eli just because I had lunch with him a couple of weeks ago. And we talked about this very topic.
Well, I think you're seeing different approaches throughout the world. And so within the EU, there's this new AI Act that is proposing quite drastic curtailment of how models are trained, developed, and deployed, not just within the EU, but also perhaps even worldwide. And I think we're going to see, as that legislation moves through this summer, and then hopefully we get clarity later towards this year, what the actual form of it takes. But it potentially is quite dramatic. I think that, again, taking off the VC hat, there's a host of national security questions that would suggest that from sort of stabilization of nation states and perceived stabilization of nation states, that developing AI and ML is quite important. And so I think that there's the regulation angle, which is sort of uncertain, but trending quite strict in the EU, TBD in the US. And then there's sort of the separate question related to national security that is probably top of mind for most of the large governments. But it's not clear how well coordinated they are.
Yeah, I think we can assume it's probably not that well coordinated, but it's a necessity, right? I think I saw a stat the other day, 50% of AI researchers believe that there's a 10% chance that AGI will kill us all one day. About 50% of AI researchers believe that there's at least a 10% chance that AGI will kill us one day. It's crazy to think about. So I think the government, will need to step in and will need to, hopefully it's, I don't know, we'll see. Necessity, needed, hopefully the brightest minds. And it seems like, I think Sam Martin was in DC the other week, breaking things down and trying to help us develop a direction. But AI is going to move faster than government, which is always going to be the issue.
What do you see as the top ethical and bias challenges of generative AI over the next 1 to 2 years?
How about assessing that?
Yeah, well,
I think the challenge with AI is it doesn't exactly explain itself. And so I don't know if we have the tooling to debug and truly understand when it is biased and when it isn't, is my opinion. I think that's a really big challenge right now.
Yeah, I mean, these transformers are literally giving fake answers, as Mark alluded to. And I mean, if you haven't seen the 60 Minutes, they actually give a couple good examples of giving fake answers. In terms of ethics, I worry about the kids right now. I just saw, I think, what is it? I'm not a social media guy, but Snapchat just released this new AI bot. like your friendly AI, whatever, you can chat with that AI person or bot at night with no one else. And I was watching a podcast and they tested the bot and they tested it as if they were a 13-year-old child having a conversation with someone that was 18 years older than them, and got into asking the bot, hey, I'm going on this date with this person that's 18 years older, and we talked about these topics. And the bot was responding with, that sounds great. That sounds like that's going to be a really fun time. And he's literally telling them that, hey, I'm going to be harmed. So things like that, I mean, that can be incredibly dangerous, particularly when it comes to our children. And I mean, that's happening right now in Snapchat. You can open it up and have that conversation, and the bot, unless they fixed it due to this podcast, but I mean, stuff like that, it's really scary, you know, and there's answers being given that the developers, the engineers on the particular transformer, they don't know why that answer was given. That's the scary part. They're literal unknowns. So
I think I think that's a great point. One other thing I'd mention is that, you know, if you classify AI as narrow in the applications that it's trying to solve versus broad, you know, where it's more sort of this general toolkit, there was progress in the narrow angles for a long time. And those types of applications, again, the computer vision, you know, is this a dog or is this not a dog? Those don't have the same ethical and moral quandaries that you have when you're chatting with a tool and potentially trying to detect, like, is this person at risk for doing something bad to themselves or others, right? And I think that the major difficulty for companies, especially these very large companies, is that they'll have to be opinionated in the values and sort of the ethics that they pre-train into these models. And in the past, you know, as a business, you really don't want to get into that, right? You want to just deliver a product. And so I think that addressing the framework, not necessarily having a prescription for what the outcomes will be or how it will show up, but addressing the framework will increasingly be the top issue, I would imagine, over the next 1 to 2 years.
I just want to kind of add on to what Israel was saying, because it came to mind. You said this earlier too. We can now create fake videos of you saying things, right? There's the generative nature of some of these models can now allow you to create something that looks very real. And I think they're going to have to come up with ways to at least authenticate or be able to, I think you have to admit or acknowledge that these are things that are going to happen. So what do we do to prevent those tools from being misused and protect people's identities, their careers, all sorts of things. I think that's another area we're going to have to really spend some time thinking a lot about.
Thank you. Before we let you go, one, what is something you want to leave with us concerning AI, about AI innovation, how the transition, how the new wave, how everything is happening? And if someone wanted to get in contact or further conversation, how they can do that. So those two things.
I'd leave you with is I'd encourage you all to leave this event, take your lunch hour, sign up for one new thing. Like, just, you can search Twitter, search LinkedIn, sign up for the easiest looking one that's going to take a minute and just give it a test. You're going to have fun. And you can shoot me a message, eli@character.vc, or on LinkedIn. I'm easy to find. Thank you.
yeah, Israel Squires, LinkedIn, easy to find as well. Download the ChatGPT app. It got released last week, I mean, and just futz with it and mess with it. It's fun, but it's quite educational as well. And I think once you start to dive into asking certain questions and actually putting code into it, it's quite fascinating.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I can't add to that. It's fun, and I think the interesting thing about it too is everybody interacts with it differently, and your personal, your individuality is applied to this stuff and creates a different outcome than anybody else is experiencing. And that in itself is fun. It's actually, once you get into it, you have to kind of pull yourself away from some of this stuff. So 100% agree with those guys. LinkedIn, another place you can meet me on. Thank you.
Thank you guys for your time, your talent, your expertise. Can we give them a round of applause for this, guys? You guys are amazing. You're free to go. Thank you so much. And before everyone leaves out, we do want to talk about some updates with NSF and what's happening with MKE Tech Hub, but I do want to bring up Data Holdings, which is one of our members, but also a sponsor of this meeting, just to kind of share who they are and kind of just, again, give a round of applause for Israel, Eli, and Mark for that time. It was such a great conversation.
Thank you. That was a good group of people, and I want to acknowledge that the Milwaukee Tech Hub in particular, we talked about talent being a problem, and that is certainly a problem here in the Midwest. And it's one thing I often talk about is people get to a certain stage in their technical skill set and then leave for the coast. And you folks are the only ones who are really actually addressing that and keeping people here and bring people up. Yes, you do love Milwaukee, and it shows, and Wisconsin. So thank you for that. I wanted to follow up on something that the panel said and not just make this a commercial for the company I work at, and that is regulation, right? We touched on that a little bit. The answers were very nuanced. But I wanted to sort of make the case that maybe regulating this is not what we want to do. We have, everyone's seen Congress lately. They're probably not going to be the first people to wrap their heads around this whole thing, right? You've got a lot of older folks who, I'm an older folks now, I'm in that category, but to wrap our heads around that and to have octogenarians wrapping their heads around that is probably not something that's going to happen. And I think it will be reactionary. The other thing is, are these calls for regulation really genuine, right? You've got, I think a lot of us probably saw Sam Altman in testifying the other day, and he said maybe some type of licensing program for this before people deploy large models or train large models. That one, it's not understood, as I mentioned. The other thing is, are they really doing this from a genuine standpoint? Is it just to create that moat? So if you haven't looked online, there was some leaked information from Google, some internal communication, and you should read it, talking about a moat between what Google has between themselves and other AI companies, and then what someone has maybe here today or in their bedroom or in their basement, and their ability to participate in this space. And that barrier to entry or that moat is very small. And so that's why we're all here today. So is Sam Altman suggesting licensing this sort of thing because he wants to save the world, or is it because he wants to create that moat to prevent everyone from participating in this revolution, right? The other thing is that I want to mention is just, let me look at my notes here, is are we really shooting ourselves in the foot? I think a lot about, does everyone know who TSMC is? Is that a familiar term for folks? So TSMC is probably the world's most important manufacturer of semiconductors. They're in Taiwan. That's why Taiwan is very important to us. Korea also has very good semiconductor manufacturing. Transistors and semiconductors were invented here in the States, and they're now completely offshore. We are begging TSMC by giving them money to come back on shore and to make their semiconductors here, because we recognize these things are super important. So I think Eli on the panel said, hey, if we do something that slows us down, some non-virtuous actors are going to just blow right past us because our jurisdiction stops at our borders. I don't want to see that same thing happen with AI. I want AI to be developed locally. I agree. It's of strategic importance to us. And I think that regulation is just going to slow that down. So just a bit on the commercial, and then I'll let you move on. I work at a company that's just down the road that was founded by the Potawatomi Business Development Corp. So we're not well known. We like to be boring. About 10 years ago, we built a data center, and it is uniquely suited to handle AI-based workloads. It handles the power density that GPUs require, that learning requires. It's the only thing like it in the state, and it's a public data center. That was a huge investment by the tribe. So if you're doing training and you have a lot of GPUs, I have a wonderful place for you. Come by for a tour and we'll show it to you. So thank you, and I'll turn it back over.
Thank you so much. So much learning today, guys. Before we wrap it up, I do want to go over the the wonderful things that are happening in the Tech Hub. I know you guys heard about a different NSF grant we have and all of the wonderful things happening. So we're going to bring Molly up to come, and she is our board chair. She's just going to give a quick overview of all the wonderful things happening in the Tech Hub. And if there's questions about that, you will be able to reach out to us afterwards to kind of figure out what next steps look like. Thank you, Molly.
Thank you.
Well, good morning, everybody, and thanks for being here today. And what a wonderful panel we had this morning, really thought-provoking. And I think, all of us will take a lot away in terms of how we contemplate kind of next steps and the implications for sure. But wanted to just provide you some updates as it relates to Milwaukee Tech Hub and some of our efforts here. Just an introduction again, I'm board chair here at Milwaukee Tech Hub. I'm also chief administrative officer at WEC Energy Group. So really happy to be here. So some of the things we talked about this morning, right, is really about the opportunities for tech talent, how we think about opportunities to continue to grow and support our growth here. We at Milwaukee Tech Hub really have a model that looks at really that supply of talent, as well as those opportunities to plug and continue to grow talent here in our region. And I think, two key areas for us is really 4M, which is where we are really helping individuals as they look at, their opportunities to really take ideas and really scale. And really, 70% of the founders who we have had part of that program are from backgrounds that are traditionally underserved in tech. And I think that's huge. When we think about our opportunities, it's going to be from those non-traditional sources. And so this is a wonderful program to help work through all of that. We've helped over 250 founders. And we've given away over 300,000 in grants to support some of these concepts. And in fact, we just had 6 recent winners last week that folks can certainly look on social media and learn more about. But really, it is the opportunity to really bridge where we think about sort of friends and family, those rounds, and really moving to really that next step in terms of scale and building their overall company. And then on the capacity side, when we think about talent, over the last 3 months, we've been working really, really closely with HERA, and through them, 18 higher education institutions. And so this is really taking the input from all of our employers. What are the things that are important to them in terms of executive education, as well as integrating AI skills into all of their majors. I mean, we've just heard this really is going to permeate really everything that we do. And so how do we make sure that that's contemplated in terms of the education that all of our students are receiving? As well as upskilling, right? So we just talked about sort of the implications for talent, how we move from where we are today, how we move forward, and in some ways, some of the leapfrog in terms of opportunity, in terms of building some of those skills. So working with them to really contemplate those opportunities, and we're going to continue to work with them to implement some of these suggestions, and really, again, with the goal to build capacity for AI as we think about overall opportunities. So other opportunities for talent engagement. So we've got several programs. Many of these you probably have seen or heard about before. From an early talent perspective, we are in our 3rd year of Fuse. And so this is really focused on the ethics and impact of data and AI, again, getting to some of the topics that we talked about today. So we are badged by HERA, which really allows us then to provide college credit when we think about some of these opportunities, which obviously is a very big deal if you're a student in who's participating. Again, this is really helping to engage those who are underrepresented in tech, both women and people of color. So about 70% of our participants fall in that category. Really ideal pipeline when we think about internships and we think about employment overall. And from a bronze membership perspective and above, gives you opportunities to engage with all of these participants. So when we think about our opportunities to bring talent in and really place them accordingly, a big opportunity there. And then, most importantly is when we think about this talent, getting visibility into what those skills and capabilities are, and so that folks have the opportunity to really leverage that more holistically. And then in the reskilling area, we were recently awarded a Department of Labor Apprenticeship Ambassador designation. And what that means is that we currently have state funding to help employers offset the cost of registered tech apprenticeship. And so this is a way for us to really bring on talent with domain expertise and technical skills. And at the same time, it's a great opportunity for us to increase our diversity of our workforce. So again, 70% of our demographics come from underrepresented those in tech. And then lastly is our upskilling opportunity. And the AI Academy funded cohort, applications are closing. You can see we've got some dates that are closing in very quickly, but we'll be working to expand this as we continue to go forward in terms of opportunity, because we know that this is a big area of focus. And then the last area that I just wanted to spend a quick moment talking about is the recent announcement of the NSF grant that was granted to our region. So this really is about energy, water resiliency in our manufacturing and utility sector. So as you can see, we've got some core partners of which we are among them. It was a $1 million grant, and it's really focused on planning over the next 2 years. The intent here is then to really leverage that as a stepping stone. As you can see, our goal is really to move into really the type 2 award, which is scaled at a much larger number of 160 million. We've got lots of partners really across all different industry, universities, venture capital, startups, and really from a geography standpoint, integrated as well. Milwaukee Tech Hub, our intent here and our role is really around workforce planning. We've talked about where we are plugging in. This will continue to be our role as we look at the economic engine. But really the next steps here are really about planning, organizing our region, seeing how we can have listening sessions, really understand where those opportunities are, identifying needs, assets, and then really overall opportunities. So really the best way to plug into all of this as we continue to move forward and as this takes shape. You can see we've got Water Council has established a website, and that will be really best opportunity to get those updates and plug in as we continue to move forward. But really excited to have an infusion of cash into the state to help us really start to formulate some of these opportunities. So with that, I think we are moving to really Q&A within the Tech Hub team. So I will turn it back over to Shakia. So thank you again, everybody, for being here. Much appreciated.
So thank you, Molly. The time is running. So what we're going to do is I'm going to call out our small but mighty team. If there's any questions in those areas, they will be here afterwards, and you will also be able to connect with them. Anything on the Fuse, anything on the AI Academy, grant information. If my team could stand and kind of raise your hand so people know where you are. I love our team. Again, we're small, but we make things happen. So Hasmeen she's with Fuse Early Talent, doing all of the amazing things. If you have questions, Sarah Sewell, anything AI Academy, reskill, upskill, inclusive workforce. Aaron Drews, which is not with us today, but you can reach out on grant information, all the wonderful things with 4M funding, etc. Antonio Davis is around here taking all of your pictures. So when you see yourself looking amazing on LinkedIn, he is the reason. And then Melissa Howard is with our marketing, all things Choose MKE, etc. And of course, me, member engagement. I've been up here all morning. But any questions on any of those things, please find one of us. Kathy is out sick. She is on virtual. She sends her love. Of course, Kathy would be here. So thank you to the team. If there's any questions, please reach out to them. And let's give a round of applause for the team making it happen today. So that is it. I thank you to my panelists again. That was great talent up here. You guys gave us great time. If in another city, they would have charged us a whole lot. So thank you for just loving us in this region and supporting the Tech Hub and everything that we're doing. Thank you for giving us your morning. Thank you for all that you do. Enjoy. Please take the coffee and the muffins that are on the other side. If there's some left, take them with you. Thank you, Northwestern Mutual, for hosting us today. You guys are amazing.